Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by City Council Majority Leader Katherine Gilmore Richardson. Lance Haver will report on water rates. Vanessa Maria Graber will discuss recent City Council legislation, and Denise Clay Murray and I will preview tomorrow's session of Philadelphia City Council. And I believe we have Denise Clay Murray right there. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. There's a lot going on, Denise.
Well, there always is.
Yeah.
There always is.
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into the interview you and I did yesterday with Majority Leader Councilmember Katherine Gilmore Richardson.
Okay.
All right, Majority Leader Katherine Gilmore Richardson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
First thing I'd like to get into, last week in council, you put up some legislation around nuisance businesses. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. Well, I introduced two bills in council last week around these nuisance businesses. But this is not the first set of bills that I've introduced to address or combat the issues that we're finding across communities around the city with businesses that are setting up without proper licensing, permitting, and zoning. I'm selling nothing but drug paraphernalia, a lot of materials that are marketed directly to our young people, locations that are close to schools and residential communities. And so I would say this is the third iteration of legislation I've introduced squarely around stores and businesses that sell, and I'll say illegally sell drug paraphernalia, because most of them lack the proper licensing and they won't go through zoning to get the community approval to sell these products. But the first bill I introduced last week is a result of the work that we've continued to do on this issue, which is around ensuring that business owners that change their LLC names or legal ownership of businesses that have come into enforcement action from the city, they try to change their LLC or business name to avoid the enforcement action of the city. This legislation will make it easier for us to connect those violations with the new business so that we are able to adequately enforce against these business owners. We typically, when you initially receive violations for either nuisance business activity or for selling drug paraphernalia without the proper licensing or permits, they go through a nuisance business abatement process, okay? And some of these companies, in order to avoid that, they will change their LLC and just continue to operate. And so then we have to start from square one in order to, again, do the enforcement action. And it's just like a revolving door that we're not able to catch up with. And so the first bill aims to combat that issue squarely. But the second bill, we worked with the police department and our partners in the administration since the last resolution hearing we had on this issue in the spring. We noticed that we needed to clean up the code in order for PPD to adequately enforce some of the additional violations for stop work and cease operation orders. Some of the language did not allow for that because some of the language inadequately referred to parts of the criminal code that are more state enforcement versus city. And so we're just going to clean up the code to make it easier for us to issue those fines and violations for stop work and cease operations orders. So it really goes to the continued work we've been doing on this issue, recognizing the ongoing challenges and how people continue to try to skirt the law to continue to operate. And we're going to address another portion of that process. And that's what we're doing with these two bills.
And it's interesting because in that hearing that happened last spring, they were asked directly, like, how come you can't go to a nuisance business and shut it down like the health department can a restaurant? And the answer is, well, it's a different process, and
Right.
there's a legislative remedy for that maybe. And that's what this is.
Right. Right. And so really, we heard a lot in that hearing, and it was a lot of information to digest in the spring about all the different challenges that we face as a city, from an operational and administrative perspective for, as an example, for health department, then for licenses and inspection, then for the Philadelphia Police Department, and then for the times that we have to coordinate with the state and federal agencies on a specific, case. So from that hearing, we parsed down a number of bills that we need to introduce to continue to address this issue, so that we can have enforcement. We know that these businesses have been popping up all across the city of Philadelphia. And I will tell you, this is an issue I've been working on since 2020 when I first became a member of council. In 2021, we had nuisance business tours in districts across the city with my district council colleagues. We brought the administration along with commissioners and deputies from every single department. And in each area, we found stores that were illegally selling drug paraphernalia, some illegally operating without any of the licensing or permitting necessary to even open a store, let alone the zoning necessary and community approval necessary to sell drug paraphernalia. I did legislation in 2021 to change the definition of drug paraphernalia in the city code. It was the first update of the definition of drug paraphernalia since the 1970s. And so that allowed us to, again, enforce and respond differently to the selling of these items. And now we're dealing with items that are completely unregulated in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, this kratom and this Delta 8. We saw in a recent news article that a public health organization tested these products, and many of them had levels of THC that was much higher than indicated on the product packaging, that it was a lot of unknown ingredients in general. And so the challenge here for us is that we have to not only crack down on these practices, but we have to let them know resoundingly that we are not going to stand for this in the city of Philadelphia.
And I feel like every time we turn around, there's a new drug or a new name for a drug that's being bandied about. It's hard to keep up. I had to Google what you were talking about because I had heard of it. And luckily the FDA had information on it, but it's, it feels like we're always like half a step behind on these things, and there's really no way to get ahead of it. How many, as a council member at large, how many complaints have you received about these nuisance businesses?
Well, we receive a ton of complaints about these nuisance businesses from across the city of Philadelphia. More recently, we've gotten complaints within the last week or two from North Philadelphia, from Fairmount, from Center City, and from Winfield. I was even out with Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. on a corridor in Winfield where we've received a number of complaints about an area that we've toured previously. We are receiving complaints from the Northeast, West Philly, Northwest. It's all over the city. I mean, these places are pervasive. They're popping up everywhere. What we're hearing is that they may be coming from, another, city and descending upon Philadelphia. We don't know, if there's any truth to that. But what we do know is that we have to get a handle on these businesses because they are marketing and selling products that we know nothing about. We don't know the ingredients of these, kratom and Delta 8 products and all the other products that they're selling. And we don't know the impacts that they would have on the public health of our constituents, but also their safety. And what we found is around these locations, they attract, a lot of criminal activity and a lot of crime happens in and around these locations. And so we just want to get a handle on it.
As an at-large member, and this is a question we've gotten a couple times actually over the summer, what are some of the different constituent requests that you do receive? Because, your office is a little different than a district council member where you're looking at the whole city. What is that difference like, and what kind of requests do you get?
Sure. So you mean overall constituent complaints,
Yes.
or just related to this topic? I mean, we receive a number of constituent complaints just from all across the city. I mean, typically, folks know to call their district council member, but not everybody knows, to call, their district member or even who their district member is. And so if someone calls our office to be serviced, we are more than happy to address whatever complaints we receive. We get a lot. This week I saw faded street sign replacement request, issues, at a local business with like overgrown weeds and bushes. I'm just thinking of some of the cases we got this week, actually. Assistance with a mother who is at the onset of a child custody battle, as an example, helping folks with utilities, particularly in the wintertime. We get a lot of those calls, or leading up to the winter, I should say, we get a lot of those calls. Raccoons. I used to be known as the raccoon lady. We have our raccoon information sheet. How to care for, your trash area at your home, what to do, if you have a raccoon setting up in or around your property. So we get a number of constituent requests. A lot of them, I would say in the last week or two also has been challenges around, some of the college students that have moved in for this semester, having late night parties. I was out on one block until midnight a couple weeks ago working with the police department to get the party shut down. But we get a number of requests from all over the city, and we work very closely with our district council members and my colleagues to ensure that we are adequately addressing those concerns.
What are some of the key things that you're keeping your eye on this fall in council?
Sure. So some of the key things that I'll be looking at, obviously, is this issue around drug paraphernalia and nuisance businesses across our city. We've gotten so many complaints from constituents all over the city that that's definitely something that we'll be focused on. Also, ensuring that we are working to address some of the long-term challenges around illegal tobacco sales. We met with a lot of business owners. I was with Councilmember Lozada as an example, and met with some business owners who had concerns around the sale of illegal tobacco and tobacco from other states, medallions from other areas. So just focusing on improving quality of life across the city of Philadelphia, ensuring that we are also focusing on my piece of housing. I've focused on tangle titles for a long time, and this pervasive issue of deed fraud. So ensuring that victims of deed fraud can receive refunds for the money that was extended on the properties that were stolen from them. So I'll be working on that as well. And moreover, I'll continue to work with my colleagues in council on their legislation, and ensuring that we can be as helpful as possible to each and every one of our members, so that we can deliver for the people of Philadelphia. So we have a lot of work to do. It's never a dull moment in council. My kids know I'm working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't get a break, but it is truly an honor and a privilege to do this work.
All right, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you for joining us, council member. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Denise.
Now, one of the topics that you took on a lot in the last session of council was the Department of Homeless Services, and specifically how it wasn't serving homeless people. Can you give us a little bit of an update on that?
Sure. Well, we've continued to work with the Office of Homeless Services, even in the last budget cycle, reviewing all the information and materials that have been presented. We know that homelessness continues to rise in the city of Philadelphia. And while our poverty level has shifted a tad, I'm sure everyone has seen the information regarding Philadelphia not being the largest poorest city any longer. We know that homelessness is on the rise. And so what we've committed to do and what we have been doing is working not only with OHS, but with the leaders of the Health and Human Service portfolio in the city, to ensure that as we receive complaints about the homeless service system, that we are dealing with them and working on them in real time. So in fact, I got a case over the weekend, family of 6, on Sunday, and sent that over to the Office of Homeless Services, and they're working very closely with the family. In addition to that, we had the legislation go into effect, wherein all departments have to do an RFP for contracts for city service. And so that started this fiscal year. As far as we know and have met with the administration, everything is going well with that process. We continue to receive, information about, the RFPs that are being released, particularly at DHS, which is one of the shining example departments. And so it is going very well. We are committed to working together to ensure that we're never in the space and place that we were in, with ensuring that folks and all the contractors that do business with the city are being paid on time, and that also they're providing good quality services to our constituents. So as of now, things are going very well.
Now, because homelessness is going up, have you heard anything about like possibly increasing the number of shelters, affordable housing? I guess how is this problem being looked at from that perspective?
And so I think one thing now that things are being sort of straightened out with all the challenges that we did face previously, we want to know how we adequately resource the Office of Homeless Services to ensure that they have the resources necessary to meet the needs of all of our constituents. And there was a new shelter that was opened as a result of these efforts for families in the Northwest. And so that location just opened within the last 2 years, ensuring that we also, continue to resource the CERC centers as an example, because that's also a stopgap location for young people to help get them to adequate service. So I do think there's obviously, and it always will be a need for additional shelters in the system. That work will be RFP'd and contracted out now, and we'll continue to support those efforts to ensure that we can get as many people, off of the streets, but also from couch surfing. It's so many individuals who, you won't even realize they're homeless because they're couch surfing from, one family or a member or to one friend to another. And so we have to do a better job of seeing those folks as well, and getting them into and onto a path of not only from transitional but to permanent housing support.
Now, the mayor's home program, among the things that it's supposed to address is the percentage, is affordable housing and getting rid of homelessness. Have you heard any new information about what's happening with that? And is council really keeping an eye on this? Because, while my goal in life is to be able to walk into a room and ask people to borrow $800 million on my behalf, the fact is this is taxpayer money.
Right, and it is taxpayers' money, and we want to ensure that we are doing the very best that we can with expending those dollars. And there are many plans within the home plan to address not only homelessness, but also to address homelessness prevention, to address affordable housing, senior housing, the repair of housing. So I think there's a lot there that we could do to ensure that we are continuing to address the needs of constituents across the city of Philadelphia. We will have further hearings and conversations about the plan later this fall, and I'm looking forward to working with the administration to ensure that we continue to make affordable housing a priority. And I will say that one thing I learned as someone who was someone who suffered with the Tangle title, that the most affordable home is the one you already have. So ensuring that folks that want to age in place and also stay in their homes have an opportunity to get their homes repaired. So there's a lot within the plan that we can do to really help low and moderate income Philadelphians, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Okay, now one last question. You are one of the few members of council that has school-age children
Yes.
that attend school in the school district of Philadelphia. The school district is talking about another round of school closings. Have you been keeping an eye on that as someone with kids? And if so, what are you seeing that maybe we haven't? Because while there's been talk about it, there haven't really been any meetings for the public to attend. So
So I will say this. I was last on a meeting that was open to the public over the summer. And so there were a number of opportunities for us to engage in the facilities planning process. And maybe that was from a parent perspective, but I received a lot of information opportunities to be on the meeting. I guess because I'm a parent of two young people in the public schools. And there were a lot of folks from the community on the calls that I was a part of. What I will say is that we know it is true that the school district is not as large as it was, when I was a public school student here in Philadelphia. And there are some hard decisions that I'm sure the district will have to make. But I will say that some things that I brought up in this process that, I've been concerned about is the process of school selection as it relates to routing our young people to their closest local public school. And so that goes back to the catchment issue. And I think that we have to take a hard look at that process, ensuring that we are routing young people to the right school so we have a real picture and idea and number of the folks that should be attending each and every neighborhood school as a baseline. Also, we know that during this facilities planning process, the school selection process continues to evolve. And so I know that that is a part of the calculus that the district will have to make as well. And I'm appreciative of the fact that the district did update the selection process this year to include sibling preference. Because I think that matters also in changes the enrollment calculus as well. I participated in at least 3 meetings and have shared the concerns and reservations that I've had about the process, particularly for not only the community where I live, which is where my children started in school, but for communities across the city of Philadelphia. We just have to be cognizant that, one, they're being routed to the right place, that we have enough seats for those locations. For the places where there are overcrowding, that we are able to alleviate that overcrowding and assist with the schools that may be under enrollment. But also for the schools that are doing a good job in increasing their enrollment, that we are not penalizing them and ensuring that they have adequate staff necessary to deal with the increase in their enrollment. So it is a lot here with the district. I do think that Dr. Watlington and his team, that they're doing a good job with transparency around this process. Like I said, I was on at least 3 of the meetings and have shared the concerns that I had individually. I know other members have been on as well. So I know the process is, getting closer, and I look forward to continuing to work with them on that process, because I know and understand the district very intimately. Our chair of education, Councilmember Thomas, has had a ton of meetings with the members of the education committee. They're meeting on a weekly basis, almost with the district. And so I know that we'll have a large part in this process.
Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, my co-host, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Majority Leader Gilmore Richardson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and have a great day.
All right. We'd like to thank Majority Leader Katherine Gilmore Richardson for joining us on the show. And now we'd like to bring on Vanessa Maria Graber. Vanessa, how are you tonight? Oh, you're muted there. There we go.
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
And sticking with the city council theme, you've been following some legislation that started in the spring and is now come to fruition.
Yes, so back in the spring, Councilwoman Betsy Lozada introduced legislation to have a curfew in her district, which is District 7, that would prohibit certain kinds of businesses from operating between the hours of 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Now, that legislation was introduced to answer concerns from the community about crime and violence in the area. And so in an effort to address that concern, this legislation was aimed at closing businesses that were operating in the area. Now, there are certain businesses that are not required to close, and those those include drive-throughs, organizations, businesses with liquor licenses, And the ones that are affected include food trucks, bodegas, takeout restaurants, and 24-hour shops. And again, gas stations are also exempt. And so violators could face fines of up to $1,000 per day, starting in November 10th. And so that legislation was actually passed by council from a vote of 16-0. It was unanimous. But here's the thing, Mayor Sherelle Parker never signed the legislation. And so it was put on hold up until last week when the mayor decided to let it pass. And maybe, Larry, you can explain a little bit of how that process works. But originally, the mayor did have some concerns and didn't sign the legislation. And so a whole summer went by. And so last week, that legislation finally went into effect.
Yeah, so it's a weird legislative quirk here in Philadelphia. If the mayor does not sign a piece of legislation that was passed, it's not a pocket veto. Instead, what happens, it's almost like a pocket signing. After 10 days, if the mayor does not sign the bill, it just becomes law. Now, the quirk here was that this was passed on the last session of City Council in the spring. And so when does the clock start? Is it then? Is it now? What does that look like? So what we found out, it took a little digging, but we found out that for a piece of legislation that's passed on the last session of council, the summer itself, however many days it is between that last session and the first session coming back in the fall, is considered 10 days. So that legislation went into effect the day City Council came back. And now that legislation will become active after 60 days. The other thing we found out, just as an aside that's kind of interesting, a piece of legislation becomes law when the mayor signs it. So it's not when it gets sent back to council. It's not when it's added to the city code. It's the moment the mayor signs it. So just so people are aware of that.
Yeah, and because it passed unanimously, even if Sherelle Parker decided to veto it, they had the votes to override it. So
you would need 12, yeah, and it had 16 to pass. So it
passed 16-0. And last spring, when we covered this, I interviewed members of the Latino Food Truck Association, which was a newly formed advocacy group representing the owners of food trucks that are primarily located in Katherine Lozada's District 7, who had not been aware of the legislation. And so at first they were targeted and fined, and a lot of their food trucks were taken away. And so those members came back to testify again, with concerns about the legislation, which they say will hurt their businesses. And so I think the question that a lot of people are asking is whether or not the city has a legal right to do this. And there is several organizations that they signed a letter, advocating against the bill, who are thinking about pursuing a lawsuit. And the question is whether or not the city can demonstrate a clear, measurable link between late night business closures and a reduction in violent crime. Now, Councilwoman Lozada says that since that has gone into effect, they've seen an 80% drop in homicides. Now, again, correlation is not causation, so it's unclear if there's other variables or policies that have affected the drop in violent crime. But we also know that violent crime is down nationwide, right? Like, this is the argument against having troops in many of these cities.
And just for the record, we've spoken with people who have told us there isn't really a clear explanation for that 80% drop in Kensington.
Correct.
Nobody's really sure why that has happened at this point.
Yeah, that is correct. And that's why I said, correlation is not causation. Like, we don't know if it's coincidental or if there are other policies that the police might have taken in order for that to happen. So a couple other things I want to mention, which is that folks testified last week, again, from that very same food truck association. And it was Fifth Street Superfood truck owner Edward Bonilla and Alta Cocina food truck owner Jose Luis. And they said that this, would hurt their business. And then hours later, after their testimony, law enforcement and city licensing officials showed up to their businesses, demanding licenses and registrations from all the food trucks in the vicinity. One of the trucks was towed despite having all the proper paperwork. And that tow cost thousands of fees and lost revenue. They had to shut down for 2 days. And the owners of these food trucks are saying that this is retaliation from the city, who they say, it's pretty clear that they were targeted because they testified against this bill. And so they are being represented by the Institute for Justice, which is kind of like a libertarian advocacy organization and public interest law firm. And so as a result, they sent a letter to the city denouncing this, right? And clearly articulating their concerns about the constitutionality of this legislation. And so there's like a 60-day education period. And that's why I said November 10th is when they'll actually start fining people. And that fine was originally going to be $500. And it's since increased to $1,000 a day, which is pretty substantial for some of these small businesses.
Mm-hmm. And we were there last week when these businesses came out to testify against the legislation and explaining their position. It wasn't just we're against this. It was, this is how much money we're going to lose if we're not able to be there at these certain times. And then just the next day, the police show up and there are fines and all kinds of things like that.
No, not the next day, hours later.
Right, right. That's not coincidental.
Right. I mean, I should also remind our viewers and listeners that these same folks who are members of the Latino Food Truck Association, who organized their members to attend an information meeting that was hosted by Councilwoman Lozada's office, were also kicked out of that meeting, right? And they were told that they weren't allowed to be there, and they were escorted out of the building. We know this because it was live streamed on Facebook, right? And they were told because they weren't food truck owners, they couldn't be there, even though some of the people that were there represented immigrants organizations or people that were doing translation and note taking for people that weren't able to be there. And so that was another case of people feeling attacked because they don't agree with the bill, yet they were attending these meetings to get information about it to be able to inform their members, and were asked to leave a public meeting. Then they were told it's not a public meeting. So, and one other concern I want to mention is the uneven police enforcement. And so Deputy Police Commissioner Francis Healy spoke to this organization, the advocacy organization, the Institute for Justice, and this is listed in their press release. He said that when the ordinance was being considered, it would likely result in inconsistent or uneven enforcement because the department continues to operate under constrained staffing and resource conditions. So again, it's unclear whether or not the police department even has the capacity to be going around and shutting down these businesses. And I should also note, it's not just in District 7, but it's also in District 8, which is Cindy Bass's district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some districts that didn't want it. Most of them didn't. I believe part of the 1st as well is in this.
Yes.
So there's a couple districts that opted into it. So this is one of those things that I is going to be challenged. I think we're going to see this in court. We're going to be coming back in a couple months and saying, well, here's what happened. Here's what the judge said. So it's going to be interesting to follow that.
Yeah, I just want to share some facts that was listed in this letter, signed by all of these different organizations. Let's say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about a dozen organizations sent this letter to City Council September 8th. And they said that 13% of the jobs in Philadelphia are part of the nighttime economy, and over $26 billion is generated in economic output through nighttime industries, 14% of which comes from the food, beverage, and hospitality industries. Over a quarter of nighttime activity happens after midnight. And they say our members, employees, and customers rely on these nighttime industries for their livelihood. And so they also don't believe, again, that closing down these businesses is actually going to be the reason why there is a reduction in violent and other crime.
Yeah. All right. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much. And we're going to be keeping an eye on that. So,
Yeah, we'll continue our coverage of Kensington and these bills, and we'll see what happens. They're threatening a lawsuit. And again, if that occurs, we'll keep you updated on all those developments.
all right, Vanessa Mary Graber, thank you so much. And now we'd like to bring on Lance Haver to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the water rates. See if we have Lance there.
I think Lance might have disappeared for a moment. So,
okay. All right.
When he gets back.
Well, in that case, then, Denise.
Yes.
Guess what's happening tomorrow?
Oh, well, it's City Council.
Yes.
And Philadelphia City Council, which from what I just looked at the most recent setup for the agenda for tomorrow's meeting, and there are lots and lots and lots of resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
There are resolutions everywhere.
Yep. So we're going to see a lot of that tomorrow.
Yes, there's going to be a whole lot of resolutions introduced. And among them, there's a resolution honoring the Philadelphia Juvenile Justice Center School, celebrating its 20th biannual Carpe Diem event, which honors all the judges and students who participate in this remarkable and beneficial event. There's several land bank resolutions, renaming the 2300 block of Snyder Avenue, Darrell James Darnell Robinson Jr.'s Way, and other resolutions. And probably another one that everybody should kind of keep their eye on. They're going to be turning the 2000 block of Snyder Avenue. They're going to name it Anton K. Moore Way. Anton Moore is a longtime South Philadelphia activist that works a lot with young people. So that's one of the resolutions that's coming up. There's only one bill that I see, and it's the Fair Criminal Record Screening Standard. It amends the Philadelphia Code in the area of fair criminal record screening standards, which amends definitions, adds clarifications, and enhances remedies, all under certain terms and conditions, which is a phrase that you hear a lot when it comes to resolutions and bills on council. But that's what I'm seeing that's on the agenda for tomorrow as of now. Some things may change, some things may be added, some things may be subtracted. You never really know until you get there.
Yeah. Now, we were there last week for opening day. Was there anything that surprised you last week?
How long it was. And here's what I mean by that. Usually the first meeting of council is maybe an hour and a half long. It starts promptly at 10. People introduce their bills and resolutions, and different things happen, and then the meeting is over. But this meeting went till 1 o'clock because you had a lot of people who had bills and resolutions they were trying to introduce. And you also had a lot of public comment, particularly in the area of the nuisance bills that we just talked about with both Councilmember Katherine Gilmore Richardson and also with Vanessa about the bill that Kathy Lozada got passed. So there was a lot of public comment. And, you usually don't see as much. Not only was there a lot of public comment, but just about everybody in council felt the need to make a speech.
Yeah.
And usually you don't get that all the time.
No.
But, I guess folks had stuff that came up this summer that they had to get off their chest.
Yeah.
And another thing I noticed, Councilmember Nicholas O'Rourke wasn't at council yet last week. My guess is he's still engaging in the practice of active fatherhood. He had when we interviewed him last year on Hall Monitor, he was getting ready to become a father. His wife was getting ready to have their first child. So my guess is he's still, engaging in the practice of active fatherhood, and that's never a bad thing.
No. So, yeah, last week, usually the first session, the last session, they're usually longer. The first session, because everybody had, months to think about what they wanted to say when we came back. And then the last session, because they know, well, it's going to be a few months before I get back in there. So I'm going to say it all now. So, those are, and budget, those are longer sessions.
Yes.
Last year we were there until about 1 a.m. It's those are the ones that usually go long. I would think tomorrow's going to be a little less busy.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that Vanessa was talking about the bill that Councilmember Lozada got passed and its impact on Kensington. There was a committee on Kensington hearing this week, and it was kind of more of the same testimony that we got when Councilmember Lozada's bill was passed. In the first place, a lot of young children from schools in the area testifying. I have my issues with that.
Yes.
Because, these kids, they go through enough having to see this stuff all day. And I'm glad that folks are taking their needs into consideration. But when you hear it more than once, you kind of have to wonder, why am I hearing this more than once?
Well, and one of the things that happened in that hearing, ostensibly this hearing was about the effects of just living in Kensington with all that around you, creating trauma for children. And that's a very legitimate concern, wholeheartedly. But what this, and they had some experts come out, but the last panel was the behavioral health department in Philadelphia, city department. And I felt like that in particular, Denise, that conversation they had, I've heard many, many times. Why are we putting so much money into this and not seeing any results? Weren't we supposed to take down all the silos? If I hear the word silo again, it'll be too soon. Why do we have all these issues? Why are we still having these discussions? I think part of this discussion really maybe wasn't all about the childhood trauma aspect of it. I think part of it may have been, let's be honest. Has anybody heard anything coming out of Kensington since that first encampment was broken up?
Not really. And what people have to realize is that Kensington did not become Kensington overnight. And I think that's something that folks have cheerfully skipped over more than once. You are not, this problem did not happen in one administration or two administrations. I remember the first time I went through Kensington when I was in college in the early 90s. And I was low on gas and driving through the intersection of Kensington and Allegheny. It was scary to me then.
Yeah.
So this problem has been a problem for a very long time. And you're not going to solve it with, you're not going to solve it in 6 months. You're just not.
No, and my suspicion is part of this hearing was more of an open question. Why hasn't anything happened since we all got here, including the mayor?
Well, that's a legitimate question, and it's one that not only should council members be asking, the public needs to ask it too.
Yeah, and I think this was a nudge, right? Like, well, we need to have this hearing, so we need to know more about what's really going on here.
Mhm.
And this was the polite way of saying, Mayor Parker, what are we doing? You know, I could see it from that angle.
Mhm.
Because again, we don't hear much about anything that's going on up there. Now
Right.
we're told, that 80% number about homicides going down. I've heard that multiple times. We hear some other things that there may be some improvements. I can't verify that, but I think if you talk to the people who live there, they're going to tell you, things are still kind of the way they've always have been. So there's a lot of questions there.
Mhm.
So now, Denise, what I'd like to do is bring on Lance Haver. Tell us a little bit about the water rates. Lance, how are you tonight? Oh, you're muted there, Lance.
I'm all right. It's always upsetting to hear just how bad things are.
Yep.
And I'm going to add to our tale of woe this evening. I'm going to talk about not one water rate increase, not two water rate increases, but 8 water rate increases over the years. Now, one of the things that people don't always recognize is if you're a tenant, your landlord may pay the water bill, but it's still included in your rent. And you may not, as a tenant, know directly that the water rates have gone up. But if you're a homeowner and you've opened your water bill this month, you have seen that there's a 9% water rate increase. This is on top of a water rate increase that was last year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that, and the year before that. And one of the things we're looking at tonight is, why does this happen? Why are there continual water rate increases after water rate increases and after water rate increases? And so what I'm going to do is call up our my slides and just go over it if I can. I'm having a little trouble getting them up there. So let me see if I can do. There we go. Thanks. So I'm sorry, this is SEPTA and not the water rate. So let me go on to talk about, if we can just pull it back, I think it's the next sets of slides. Here we go. We can just pull this up. Thank you. So in 2016, the water bill was $67.43. That's the average water bill. It's gone up now so that the typical water bill is over $90. And that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at these incredible increases year after year after year. And so just to go through it very quickly, in 2022, we're looking at a bill that was $69.15 that went to $73.92. In 24, it became $84.03. And now we're looking at a bill that's going to be $89.42. Now, how does that happen? How is it that so many of the bills go up? And we should look a little bit about the process that's used. In the bad old days, the water commissioner used to look at his budget and say, well, you know what? I think I need a water rate increase. And he would recommend a water rate increase. He would then hold hearings, and then he would decide whether he was right, that there ought to be a water rate increase. Now, this process was changed by former Council President Clark and Councilmember Jones. They introduced a bill that changed the way water rates were going to be set. And they set up a body that was going to go ahead and establish water rates. And on the board was somebody who was a consumer advocate, someone who represented the business community, someone who represented the developers community, someone who represented the water company itself, and someone who represented utility service. So there are 5 members on the board. Of those 5 members right now, one is the former water commissioner, one is the former chief legal counsel for PGW, 2 are developers, and 1 is the chair of the commission, Sonny Popowski, the former state consumer advocate. So the way it works now is the water department asks for a rate increase. City council says, okay, let's hold hearings. And here's where it gets corrupted. We've been using the same process over and over and over again. And the Water Rate Board appoints a public advocate, but then doesn't say the public advocate has to represent the public. In fact, just the opposite. The public advocate is not supposed to represent the public. There are no client groups. There's no community groups. There's no clergy. There's no union member. In fact, the only people that the public advocate answer to is the Water Rate Board themselves. And when we pressed on this issue and we said, well, wait a minute, isn't the public advocate supposed to represent the public? The answer was no. They're not supposed to represent the public in any legal definition of representing. They don't have to take the public's point of view into consideration. So that becomes the problem. The second part of the problem is the hearing examiner. The hearing examiner is appointed by the same Water Rate Board. Now, just to make it clear, the water commissioner is appointed by the mayor. The Water Rate Board is appointed by the mayor. The public advocate answers to the Water Rate Board. Everybody answers to the mayor. And the mayor doesn't take any responsibility for any of this. In fact, the water commissioner is now out the door and we're going to have a new water commissioner. But there is no prohibition against the following. The same hearing examiner year after year after year. Now, if the hearing examiner rules against the water department or rules against the Water Rate Board, what's the likelihood that they're going to get reappointed? And because it's not a one-time and you're done appointment, and one side gets to pick the judge. So it's be like this. You go into court and you're being sued, and the people who are suing you get to appoint the judge. Well, you probably wouldn't be very happy with that idea, and you probably wouldn't think that that's an independent judge. But that is exactly the model we have. The city gets to pick the judge, and the city's asking for the water rate increase. The second thing that happens, and again, I want to be as clear about this as I can. I don't believe that the people who run the water department, the lawyers who work for the water department, and this is just part of the white collar patronage club. The water department hires outside counsel. They come from big law firms and little law firms. They all get paid an awful lot of money, but none of them are ignorant. None of them are stupid. None of them are without skills. Now, I believe they're corrupt, not in the terms of they're getting money in their pocket, although they are getting money in their pocket in fees, and they are getting money in their pockets in contracts, but they're not being paid off under the table in that form of the word corrupt. What I mean by the word corrupt is it's just a corrupt system. The water department knows that they can't get every penny that they ask for, that there's nobody who would stand for that. So here's the game. The water department asks for more than what they want, knowing full well that there's going to be a process and there's going to be 10% less that they get than what they've asked for. And that's really all they wanted. And there's an easy way to know this. When the water department gets the rate increase, it doesn't have to change anything. It continues with the same number of consultants, continues to hire the same number of contractors, same people are getting the contracts to buy the supplies from. Nothing changes. There's no combining PGW, the Philadelphia Gas Works, which is the other municipally owned utility, with the Philadelphia Water Department. There is a municipal buying cooperative in the nation because a lot of water departments are still municipally owned. And almost a number of them have gotten together and said, well, look, we all buy the same chemicals. We all buy a lot of the same supplies. Let's pool our resources and bring the price down. The water department doesn't have to do that. They don't have to join it. They're not asked to join it. And in fact, when they're questioned about it, they say they're not allowed to do it because the city won't allow them to buy through the buying cooperative. So when they get the rate increase, even though they like to point out, well, it wasn't every penny we asked for, the truth is they don't have to change any of their behavior. There's no requirement that they do anything different. So going back to the process The water department asks for, in my opinion, more than what they want. The water rate board appoints the same public advocate that they've appointed year after year after year, despite requests that the public advocate meet with community groups, have a client group, be responsible to consumers. The public advocate refuses. They say, no, we don't want to do that. We shouldn't have to answer to anyone other than the water rate board. Public advocate hires its own consultants. The water department hires not one, not two, not three, but 7 consultants. And again, here you can see just how corrupt the process is. They don't hire a single consultant to try and find cost savings. They don't hire a single consultant to find ways to make the rates more affordable. They don't hire a single consultant to do anything to serve the public. Every one of those consultants is hired to justify the rate increase. Now, you'd think the public advocate would do something about that they say, well, let's hire someone who's going to find cost savings. And the answer to that is they don't either. Now, they don't hire as many consultants. They only hire 3. The water department hires 7. But the end result is the same. Nobody is actually looking to find ways of saving. So they hold hearings and people do show up. People show up. They say we can't afford it. They say it's a real struggle. They say you've got to do something about it. And after the public hearings are over, there are what's called technical hearings. Now, for years, I have been participating in those technical hearings. And the reason for that is, as a reporter, any question I ask doesn't have to be answered. As a participant in the technical hearing, by law, I have a right to get those answers. So I raise these issues. And what ends up happening is the water department and the public advocate say, okay, we're now going to schedule a time for negotiations. And what that means is the public process ends. They go behind closed doors. Now, I say it's secretive. They say it's not secretive. This is the way negotiations work. You never share with anyone what you're negotiating with. And then they come out and they say, okay, here's the settlement we negotiated. And as I said, it's always slightly less than what the water department wanted, because of course they can't give the water department everything they want. That would look ridiculous. So they cut it by 10%, which is really what the water department wanted to begin with. It's like those old days when the department stores would say we're having a 20% off sale, and the day before the sale they'd raise all the prices by 20%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like there's a sale, but there's not. So then they come up with a settlement, and here's how bad it is. There's no hearing on the settlement. Nobody gets to comment on the settlement. The public doesn't get to comment. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea that there's a settlement other than the water department, the lawyers who are supposed to be representing the public but are representing the public water rate board, and those people like myself who have entered as technical participants. No public hearings on the settlement. Nobody knows. And then because it's a settlement, the hearing examiner, who gets hired year after year after year and year after year after year, says, great, it's settled. I don't have to do anything. I'm now going to say, well, look, both sides are happy, so I'm just going to recommend that we accept it. And then it goes before the water rate board, and the water rate board says, well, why shouldn't we do it? Everybody is happy. And of course, what they mean when they say everybody is happy is they mean the water department and the people they hire are happy, but the public is struggling with rate increase after rate increase after rate increase. And that's what I mean when I say it's a corrupt process. The water department goes behind closed doors with the lawyers that are hired by the water rate board, agree to increase that's slightly less than what was asked for, and then announce, here it is. And they try and say, well, the public should feel good because they didn't get 100% of what they asked for. They only got 90%. And that's the corrupt process.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Lance, thank you for that report. I know we've been talking about water rates for as long as you've been doing the show.
Right. And it's one of those things that city council could change overnight if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it becomes, I know I'm saying this over and over again, but for a progressive democratic city that claims we care about poor people, and we brag we're no longer the poorest big city in America, Why we don't care about how much more money we're taking out of people's pockets is beyond me. I don't understand why we don't care about how we impoverish our own when we don't have to.
Yep. All right, we're gonna have to leave it there, and we'll be back next week on Hall Monitor.